All right. So like I said, this is our quarterly training updates on statewide employment initiatives. So this training is being hosted by the Minnesota Transformation Initiative, or MTI. MTI is a project funded by the Minnesota Department of Human Services to build capacity to support competitive integrated employment across the state. And you'll be hearing a little bit more about what MTI has been up to and what is coming next for MTI a little bit later in the presentation, because we are one of those statewide employment initiatives. So there'll be an opportunity to learn more about what we've done and what we'll be doing pretty soon here. But before that, I'm going to turn it over to our state agency partners who are here to present on various initiatives that they are leading across the state. So we have a number of presenters today. So I'll introduce their names and titles, but if they want to introduce themselves further, they certainly can once they get started with their parts of the presentation. We have 6 presenters from state agencies today. Beth Gruby, who's the Benefits Planning Coordinator for the Disability Services Division at DHS, Department of Human Services. Christy Howe, the Employment First Lead for the Disability Services Division at DHS. Cole Sorensen, the E1MN Coordinator at the Disability Services Division at DHS. Holly Sunderman, who is Voc Rehab's E1MN Coordinator. Kara Temple, who's the Interagency Secondary Vocational Educational Specialist / E1MN Coordinator and that at Minnesota Department of Education. And Kayla Watson, who is the GoMN Navigator for Voc Rehab. So I am going to turn it over to our esteemed colleagues to present on what they've got going on.
Okay. Does everybody see my screen? That's good to know. Wonderful. Okay. So, like Danielle said, my name is Kayla. I am the GoMN Navigator. So today I just wanted to provide some updates, give a little refresher too. I know it might be a while, or might have been a while since some of you have heard the phrase GoMN. So just a quick little bit of background information. GoMN is a 5-year DIF grant, and we're working on sub-minimum wage to competitive integrated employment like the MTI initiatives are. We're utilizing a progressive employment model, and I'll speak to that a little bit later. And we have a couple of evaluators, including ICI Boston. So they're the Institute for Community Inclusion, which gets a little confusing for us when we're working with ICI Minnesota and ICI Boston. And then Mathematica is our other evaluator. They're our national evaluator. ICI Boston is also providing us some technical support. So they are the ones who are providing the progressive employment training for all of us who will be involved with that project. So just a very brief overview of progressive employment, again, just to give a little refresher, a little background. Progressive employment is a model that has been demonstrated to help individuals move from sub-minimum wage into competitive integrated employment. It's really about meeting participants where they're at. So it could be something, like let's start out with a tour, right? Let's maybe start out with an informational interview, things like that, to really just kind of get the ball rolling, to kind of start this process. And it utilizes these 4 components. So business relations, so it's a dual customer model. So we're focused on providing supports for job seekers as well as meeting the needs of employers. Risk mitigation and team approach. So we have this really great group of people who are going to be involved with this, and we will do probably either once a week or once every other week. We call them Jobsville, which is basically our fancy way of saying case consultation. So as the navigator, I will be bringing participants information to these meetings, and we'll be working with case managers and CRPs, some Voc Rehab staff, to really brainstorm how we're going to move forward with participants. So like I said, progressive employment is meeting people where they're at. So we're just looking to explore work to get the ball rolling. So like I said, tours, informational interviews, shadows, internships, things like that. So again, meeting the participant where they're at. So with that background, now to provide a little bit more specifically updates for this program. We are piloting this program in Duluth. We are looking to launch end of June, beginning of July. That's our time frame right now. And it's been interesting because initially this project, when the grant was written, we were looking at working with 14C providers. But in Duluth, there are now 0 14C providers. So we've had to kind of shift a little bit on the population that we're looking at. So instead of just targeting those individuals who are in sub-minimum wage, we're looking at people who may have previously been tracked to sub-minimum wage, people who maybe are living at group homes and now don't really have any employment lined up, or maybe some individuals who are receiving minimum wage but maybe working in more of an enclave type setting. So we've had to kind of shift a little bit, like I said, but we still have a lot of individuals that we can reach with this. So like I said, piloting in Duluth, and then after we kind of get that rolling and learn what we need to from the pilot, we'll start to disseminate that across the state in some other locations, potentially St. Cloud or the Twin Cities or somewhere south as well. So that's still up in the air a little bit. We are looking at adults and youth right now in Duluth. As we're getting this project off the ground, we're just focusing on adults for now, but we will add in the youth as well. So as far as our team goes, like I said, I'm the navigator, so I will be working with participants. I will be getting referrals from case managers or just kind of letters of interest, and I'll be connecting with participants and kind of talking them through the program, and bringing those referrals to Jobskill too if they decide to participate in the Go Amend project. We have a business engagement specialist who, as the name suggests, is very focused on getting businesses engaged with us and getting businesses just our information, what we're doing, and building those partnerships. And then lastly, not listed here, we are in the process of hiring a benefits navigator. So one of the biggest barriers that comes up when we're talking about transitioning into competitive integrated employment is what's going to happen to my benefits. Where is my money going to go? How am I going to deal with this? So we're really looking to meet that head on, and by hiring that benefits navigator and really working with participants so they have an idea and they understand what their next steps are going to be and what their finances are going to look like. And then lastly, so we're focused on the transportation industry and we're interpreting that very broadly. So when you think transportation, you might think, truck driver, mechanic, things like that, which definitely fall under transportation industry. But we're also looking at things that touch the transportation industry. So that can be material handling, that can be, cleaning buses, things like that. And Duluth is a little bit unique in that we have several modes of transportation that are stationed. We have, trucks, auto, things like that, but we also have rail, maritime. So there are going to be a lot of unique opportunities for participants. So the grant required us to pick an industry. And so we went with the transportation industry because we have so many different opportunities and ways to get participants into that industry. So partners, like I mentioned a little bit, we are working with St. Louis County, St. Louis County case managers, St. Louis County schools. We have 3 CRPs that we're working with in the Duluth area. We have Trillium, North Star, and UDAC. So we have met with them, we're partnering with them, and they're going to be part of those progressive employment trainings, and they will be part of those Jobskill meetings. So their role again, it's pretty business as usual to take on those referrals, to go through kind of those work activities, and assist participants in building those work skills. The SILs, we have some VR staff that we're specifically working with right now, again, just in the Duluth office. And then we also partnered with the Minnesota State Transportation Center of Excellence, which is a mouthful, but they have a lot of great input on, you know, ways to introduce people to the transportation industry, a lot of great business partners and things like that. So we're very excited that we're able to work with them. So as I said, launching June, July, starting with that outreach and recruitment. So like I said, we're working with counties and schools. We're kind of figuring out and working through, you know, what does a participant look like when case managers or special ed work-based learning instructors are looking at their caseloads. How do we identify people who would be a good fit for the GoMN project? And we are also getting some help from ICI Minnesota with that, to help kind of to just develop some information, develop some training, to just give some more information to case managers, families, individuals as well. So when we are working with participants, we're still going to be following the E1MN model. We're just kind of sprinkling in progressive employment, with our VR services, work experiences, placement, things like that, to again help with that risk mitigation. So we have kind of that team working around the case, and there's just a little bit more support, if you will, for the participant as they're moving through this, where they're engaging with VR a little bit earlier in the process than they would if they were just going through the traditional E1MN process. We, like I said, we're engaging earlier. So the hope with that is that the process is more seamless, and we can help participants move along at their pace. Like I said, transportation industry, that's our main focus with this, and again, very broad. And then we're utilizing Workforce One and Salesforce to kind of track all of this. So the business engagement will be using Salesforce. Navigator, myself, will be using Workforce One to track activities, to refer as well to the VR staff. So we're being very intentional about making sure that we have all of the information in one place and we can access it. So towards the end of this, we have a good idea of what worked and what didn't. So that is kind of my brief overview, my brief updates. If there are any questions, I am happy to answer those.
I see there is a question in the Q&A, so I can read that and just sorry, was someone else trying to speak? No. Okay. If any of the attendees has questions, please put them in the Q&A. Like I said in the chat, we'll answer them after each section. You can also click raise hand and we can unmute you if you'd rather talk to ask a question. The current question we have is, Kayla, could you please share the extent of the quote Duluth area? Is this the upper Northeast or a smaller geographic area? And I apologize, I missed the timeline you shared for moving beyond the area. If you could restate that, please and thank you.
Yeah, great question. So Duluth area, we're thinking St. Louis County and Carleton County right now. So that might change depending on our outreach numbers and how many individuals we're able to reach. But right now we're mainly focusing on St. Louis County and Carleton County. And then as far as disseminating throughout the state, that's a good question. Like I said, we're launching June, July. And I don't know the exact time frame. It'll be several months after we launch, so we can kind of gather some information. But I don't think we have an exact timeline for when we're kind of moving beyond the Duluth area.
Another question, can you explain what is Mathematica?
Yeah, so, and forgive me, I'm the navigator, I'm not supervising the project here, but Mathematica is a national evaluator, and they are part of the grant, part of the grant was we needed to evaluate, right, the success or how the project is moving. So they're kind of the neutral. They're gonna just come in and collect data. They're gonna be interviewing participants, sending out surveys, things like that, to gain insight into experiences and outcomes and things like that. So that's the extent that I know about Mathematica. If that doesn't really answer your question, I'm happy to follow up with the team and get some more specific information to you.
Hey there, Brian Bajan here, University of Minnesota, ICI. Yeah, Mathematica collects a range of data related to long-term supports and services. So in another project that I work on, we use data from Mathematica that they collect on expenditures for folks living in long-term care facilities and psychiatric facilities and whatnot. So they do a lot of stuff with data. I think that's really cool that you all are working with them. And then on that note, I actually had a question. Are the providers you're working with in the Duluth area, do they have to use the Workforce One system?
No,
Okay.
no. So that it gets a little clunky sometimes, but they will be providing their notes, their information to us, kind of like normal. We will be meeting regularly too. Those are kind of the Jobsville meetings. We'll get updates and new cases and things like that. So then that'll be my responsibility to make sure that that's going into Workforce One. And then eventually it'll be the VR counselor who's doing that when they're moving into kind of that find or that looking for employment.
Thank you.
All right, we got a couple of other questions. How many hours of work per day or per week per participant? How many work slots can be filled? There's kind of a lot of little questions in here. So maybe I'll read it and I can kind of go back and break it down as needed. But how many hours of work per day or per week per participant? How many work slots can be filled? How much was the grant for? Will participants still go to a day program? Who is arranging the transportation to the work site? Who is overseeing the work? A job coach that follows them to the site, or participants expected to work independently? Are the paychecks expected to be greater or less than current sub minimum wage jobs? So a lot of questions a little bit more about the nitty gritty on the ground.
Yeah. So I want to make sure that I answer each of them. So what was the first one, Danielle?
Yep, let's break it down. How many hours of work per day or per week per participant?
It's going to depend. It's going to be a conversation that we have with participants and their team to figure out what's going to work best for them. For some people that might be a couple hours a week, and we're willing to work with that participant and find something that's going to work for them. So we don't have, but like, this is the program, these are the people that we're going to funnel them to, and these are all the slots that are going to be filled. It's really this team approach, this group effort, kind of not necessarily customized employment, but kind of in that realm of things where it's really, really dependent on each participant. So there's not going to be a set number of hours or anything. It's going to be dependent on the participant, like I said.
I think that also answered how many work slots can be filled. It sounds like it's very person-centered and dependent on them. So the next question is, how much was the grant for?
That's a good question. I do not know. I can follow up on that certainly, but off the top of my head, I do not know.
Will participants still go to a day program?
If they choose. If it, again, looking at benefits and things like that, if they're able to get transportation to and from their day program, that can certainly work. So if they want to continue going to their day program, that's absolutely a possibility. And something that, again, we'll kind of work through on an individual basis.
Who is arranging the transportation to the work site?
Again, it kind of depends. there are some group homes that will provide transportation. Sometimes it'll be up to the individual. We're currently gathering some resources for that as well, because we know transportation can be a huge barrier. So it's, again, kind of going to be on that individual basis. And we're going to work through that with each participant that comes through.
I'm going to guess that as a similar answer to the next one, which is who's overseeing the work. Is there going to be a job coach, or are they expected to work independently? My guess is that based on what you're saying, it's dependent on the person's support needs and their particular situation. Is that right?
Yep, it's going to depend. And we do anticipate having job coaches and things like that on site. And what we're focused on is finding the best fit for the individual. And if it's a good fit, eventually we will be able to kind of leverage those natural supports that exist. But we fully anticipate, this is new for a lot of people. They haven't really considered potentially competitive employment or some of these opportunities that are out there. So the CRPs are going to provide job coaching for the time frame that we can. Sorry, let me back up. So the CRPs will be providing job coaching throughout kind of the contract when VRS can pay for that. And then once we switch back over to the county, then there can be some job coaching and some extended employment stuff with that as well.
And then the final sub question within this big question is, are the paychecks expected to be greater or less than current some minimum wage jobs?
Greater. That's kind of the overarching expectation, but not anything we really have data on yet. But that's the goal.
We have another question in the Q&A here. What is the difference in the job functions or roles of the business engagement staff and job developers working directly with the person, with the job seeker?
So yeah, our business engagement specialist is really out there in the community, going to career fairs, going to events, going to trainings to really network with businesses specifically, and kind of figuring out what the businesses need. It's we're not really looking at as a difference, we're looking to supplement. So we're really looking to kind of round out that experience and have somebody who's just solely focused on that, who doesn't necessarily have a caseload of 30, 40, 50 people that they're working with, providing those services too. So it's, like I said, it's supplementing what job developers do and things like that.
All right, thanks, Kayla. That's all the questions that we have right now in the chat.
Awesome. Yeah, well, thank you. And if anybody thinks of anything, feel free to pop it in the chat or the Q&A, and I can answer it at another time too.
All right, then we're going to turn it over to our next presenters from the state agencies.
Great. Yes. Hi. So glad to have all of you here. So that just shows the training that we're here for. And I'm going to go into just cover what's on our agenda and then go through my part of it. So we have 4 main topics here that we're covering on the agenda. We're going to give you some updates about the regional collaboration meetings that we've had regarding E1MN that attendees have been from counties, VRS, SSB, and then MDE, so school districts, to learn about E1MN. Then we're going to talk a bit about benefits planning, the E1MN case manager trainings that have happened, and then just some brief sub-minimum task force report updates. So with that, we'll get right onto the regional meetings. So just really briefly, we held in February and April, we held a series of regional meetings, like I said, for professionals representing school districts, school districts and charter schools, waiver case managers that included county and tribes, and then vocational rehab or state services for the blind service providers. And just to give you a little bit of background or grounding into E1MN and the reason we held the regional meetings. It's important to know that E1MN is an unprecedented collaboration between the Department of Human Services, the Disability Services Division, the Minnesota Department of Education, and the Department of Employment and Economic Development, which includes state services for the blind and vocational rehab. Our mission is to work together to deliver more seamless and timely support systems for people with disabilities, both adults and youth. We want people to get the services they need when they need them. So E1MN is not a new program or service. It's just the way that we work together. And these regional meetings, just to kind of go back, were held as a launch to the work with E1MN youth that brought in the school districts from what you may already be aware of as the E1MN adult work. So we just expanded it. And that's where schools came into the picture. So the purposes of these E1MN regional meetings, I've already talked about who we brought in, but the purpose was to learn about E1MN and Minnesota's transition framework, introduce tools to help them identify opportunities for system improvement, and to build E1MN local teams. I'll go into more detail about the purpose of those of each specific meeting series coming up, as well as what the E1MN local teams are. So we really wanted to hold these E1MN regional meetings to help professionals understand E1MN youth and the addition of the local school districts, and to introduce the transition framework. So at this point, the meetings are not digging in to, they're not including the service providers at this point, because we're really at this point not digging into how to provide the services, but really kind of developing those local teams, really firm up and begin the local collaboration around the transition service and support system. And like I said, it was also to help professionals understand the E1MN youth and the additions of school districts. So we talked about that. With the addition of the school districts and the concept of local teams, the meetings provided space for partners to make connections and to understand how collaboration will make their job easier as they support youth with disabilities to transition into life after high school. And so to increase understanding about the collaborative efforts, we reviewed the roles of the school, vocation, voc rehab, and county case managers. So all of these regional meetings were held virtually, and the goal of the February meeting was to help school districts, county, and voc rehab staff to understand E1MN youth and how to build the local team. So it was very, very basic at that point. I've talked about it a little bit already. In the April meetings, we discussed reviewing data and Minnesota's transition framework system improvement strategies, with a focus on the 6 guiding principles that are included in the framework. And then at this point, we do have meetings planned for October that will help teams to learn how to plan for and implement the strategies of that framework. All right, and so now I'm going to go back to the February meeting. So for the start of the E1MN youth efforts, and to orient the agencies or the representatives from the 3 agencies, our first meetings were a series of 3, so 3 separate meetings that between the 3 covered 6 regions throughout the state. So the meetings were a combination of a PowerPoint presentation and breakout room discussions that were divided by the 6 regions. The February meetings were designed to bring DHS, DEED, and MDE together at the practitioner level within those, again, county, VRS, SSB, and school districts, to help them understand the framework of Minnesota Transition Services, understand the role of case managers, VRS staff, and school district staff, and to introduce the concept of and facilitate the development of the local E1MN teams. We also introduced the first assessment tool for teams to complete between the February and April meetings. So there is a link in the slides, which you will get after the presentation, to the recording of that February meeting, as well as the passcode for you will be able to see that. So you'll get to see the presentation if you go to that link. Next slide. Cool. There we go. Okay, so I am bouncing around a little bit. I'm just trying to kind of flow with the content and the context. So I talked about how the February meetings were to develop these local teams. So what are those local teams? And I had mentioned, well, E1MN, the local team is not a new term. It is a new term. It is not a new concept. So we recognize that there are already many amazing partnerships happening around the state. However, we also know that these partnerships are not happening everywhere yet. So we want to provide the resources to help make those collaborations happen. A primary goal of E1MN is to see that there are as many E1MN local teams as possible, so that we can have the most consistent transition services available to all youth with disabilities. So the E1MN local teams is a team that includes staff from a school district or charter school, the vocational rehab services and state services for the blind staff that serve students at that school district or charter school, the waiver case managers that serve students there, and then other members as the team feels is appropriate, such as employment services providers, tribal nations, and other partners that have a role in supporting youth, and then as well as advocacy agencies. And so for the work of the local E1MN teams, their role is to work together to ensure that all students with disabilities they serve get high quality transition services, meet regularly to coordinate services, complete a self-assessment, and implement strategies for system improvement, which we will be reviewing in this and upcoming meetings. And then most importantly, an E1MN local team partner so that everyone's job can be easier. So the local teams are specific to an area, and just to be clear, they are different than an individual student's IEP meeting. So now Holly will continue to talk more about the regional meetings as well as the meeting that we held for service providers. Holly.
Hi, everyone. All right, so Kara talked a little bit more in depth about the February meetings, but I'll cover a little bit more about the April meetings. So in April, we held 2 meetings covering 6 regions. The structure was the same as the February meetings, but with more and smaller breakout rooms. So the specific purpose of the April meeting was to understand the E1MN transition framework, focusing on guiding principles, particularly guiding principle 6, to really help guide the work of the local teams. Guiding principle 6 is successes measured by improved youth outcomes. And so we also at that meeting introduced the part 2 of the self-assessment activity. If you're looking for the link of the April meetings, it's included on the slide. So if you'd like to look back and listen, our content is on there. All right. So for service providers, the meeting was held on February 29th, and that was really to just update the service providers and review what was happening with the E1MN regional meetings, and really to kind of loop them in. Service providers are just a crucial partner in the E1MN system. While they weren't provided in the regional meetings, they need to be informed about what is happening and what will be brought into the future and will be brought into the future E1MN meetings and activities. The regional meetings were focused on aligning and understanding between leadership at the schools, the lead agencies, and Voc Rehab and SSB. not addressing how to provide the service once a youth has graduated from high school. That will come later. And so I saw a question before I started chatting about why they weren't included. And it really, we agree that service providers are an integral part of the team, and we don't want to dismiss that at all. We really are focusing on the 3 state agencies. That's really what the memorandum of understanding had presented to us. And so that's why service providers were not included at that time. As you can see in the slide, the service provider meeting is included. So if you'd like to listen back, have at it. So when it comes to transition for youth, the providers are contracted by schools, VRS or SSB, and or waiver programs to provide transition and pre-ET services, employment-related services, and or waiver services. Their role is to hold the intake of the first meeting with the youth, learn who is on the team, understand the youth's strengths and needs, participate in meetings to ensure coordination of services and progress toward transition goals, provide high quality services, implement the plan, track progress, and reflect and communicate with the other team members. Whew, that's a lot. And so we understand the role, again, is very important for you service providers. There are detailed descriptions of all of our roles on the Disability Hub website, and we included the link. It really is nice to check that out to understand, what is the role of a waiver case manager? How about a voc rehab or SSB counselor? So it's a great place to check out. To recap, our vision is to have stronger coordination between schools, VRS, SSB, and lead agencies. The regional meetings focused on coordinating services for youth to develop collaborative teams to work toward improving our services for youth with disabilities. Local teams will take time to develop and align. We know that it doesn't happen overnight. And lastly, providers will be brought in on the individual person's team when they need the service from the provider. And so we don't want to discredit that. That's an important part to play. I will pass it off to Beth to talk about benefits planning.
All right. Thank you. Hi, everybody. I'm Beth Gerby with the Department of Human Services. I am the benefits planning coordinator, and I'm just going to talk a bit about benefits planning. If you want to go to the next slide, please. All right, so we have done a lot of different engagements with a lot of people over the last year or so in a lot of different ways, but one way was through the Task Force on Eliminating Subminimum Wage. And as we did the engagements, we keep hearing things about benefits. And I love that GoMN is hiring a benefits coordinator or planner to specifically focus on helping people manage their benefits because it's really needed. And we heard a lot of things. So people with disabilities and their families told us things like, there's still that belief that benefits end or change if they go to work. What's going to happen? There's this fear. They don't know about work incentives, which are rules that help people be able to work and keep the benefits that they need. And they don't have to be afraid of losing those benefits with the special rules that exist now. There was a lot of concern about people earning subminimum wage who would move to competitive integrated employment, that they would have to work fewer hours in order to keep their benefits. They also told us they want better benefit supports. They really wanted professionals to be able to be aware of the benefits and understand what their work rules were and what changes would have to happen. And they also told us that they really don't rely on case managers or even service providers to answer benefit questions, that they really tend to figure them out themselves, or they work through those questions on their own. So given all of that information, if you want to go to the next slide. So one of the recommendations that was actually passed in legislation, and it was to help ensure the whole part of informed choice related to employment. There was legislation that was passed in 2023 that required case managers to waiver case managers to offer all working age people with disabilities benefits planning assistance, so that people can understand what work incentives are available to them, and they can understand the impact of work on their benefits. And when the slides are available, there's a link in there to those legislative changes, so you'll be able to take a look at them. So with that, it's important to understand what benefits planning is. And when we talk about benefits planning, we're not just talking about this specific service that people get where you sit down and you hash through all of the benefits and see what they are and what's going to happen to them. Benefits planning includes things like conversations. So when somebody says, I can't work because I have SSI, you can have a good response to that, where you can say, actually, there are rules that can help people work, and let's dig into them and see what that looks like. So it's including answering questions. So if somebody has a question about what's going to happen to their benefits when they go to work, you can answer that question, or you can know where to go to get the answer. So there really is this specific person-centered process of reviewing and understanding the impact of work on benefits. That is benefits planning, but it's more than that as well. And it's really just all about helping people make an informed choice that's going to support their ability to get ahead financially. That's really what we all want. If we're going to go to work, you know, people go to work for a lot of reasons. They're, you know, they might be going to work to have socialization and things as well, but everybody wants to get ahead financially. So helping people understand what's going to happen to their benefits and their bottom line income when they do go to work. That's what benefits planning is all about. Next slide. Thank you. Oh, whoops. There we go. And so we want to make sure that you understand, well, how is benefits planning covered? Benefits planning is covered under waiver employment services. Waiver case managers can authorize waiver employment exploration, waiver employment development, and waiver employment support services for benefits planning. So the great news is that case managers are now going to expect waiver employment service providers to be able to provide benefits planning services. And the good news is we have a plan for that. There is a page on the Disability Hub website, excuse me, in the work toolkit, in the benefits planning toolkit, sorry, that is called Agency Strategies. There's a link on this slide to that specific page. And it just goes through and really talks about what are the key messages that we're talking about. What is the expectation, and what are the training paths that supervisors and staff can take to understand more about benefits. We have different levels of benefits planning training. So we start off at level 1, very basic, just the general information that everybody who works with people with disabilities should know about work and benefits, what benefits exist, what are the most common ones, and the basics about the impact of work. And then level 2 goes deeper into, we have now 11 modules in that training, and they're online self-paced trainings, and goes through the different work rules for different benefits, and then the tools and resources that support that information. And then there's benefit coach training as well, if your agency is really needing more information. So that agency strategies page is where you can find all of that information. The other thing I should mention that is not on this slide is that Voc Rehab also, and State Services for the Blind also cover benefits planning as part of their services. So whether you're a provider or a staff of Voc Rehab, or in a county or at a provider organization, benefits planning can be covered. All right, next slide, please. Thank you. And the last thing I wanted to leave you with is the key messages about work and benefits. We're really trying to get this out there that if you leave with nothing else today, we hope you remember that there are these 5 key messages that work and benefits can go together. All public benefits in Minnesota support work now. So that is something a lot of people don't know. Every benefit in Minnesota, from MFIP, the Minnesota Family Investment Program, SNAP, the what used to be food stamps, medical assistance, all of our programs in Minnesota now have work rules that support work. Number three, people who work earn more money than those who don't, even if their benefits change. So helping people understand that, yep, your benefits might change, but we can help you figure out how to be better off. Number four, benefits should not be the reason someone chooses not to work. There might be a lot of other reasons, but I can't work because of my benefits should never be the reason somebody chooses not to work. Number five, benefits planning helps people see how work is possible. So that's really important. Really, the goal is to help people see possibilities and plan well so that they don't end up with overpayments and they don't end up losing out because they went to work. So helping them work to their full potential, save money, and get ahead financially. That is the goal. So thank you. And I will turn it over to Cole.
Hi, my name is Cole Sorensen, and I am the E1MN coordinator at DHS. One other resource we wanted to share with you today was our E1MN training, which is available on the Hub. Some of you may already be familiar with the training and have taken it yourselves, while for others, it might be new. So we just wanted to let you all know that the resource is up there and give a quick overview of what it is and how to find it. The E1MN training is a training with guided learning and scenarios that helps you to understand your role in supporting adults on waivers with employment. Right now, it is focused mostly on adults, although over time we will be bringing in more information about youth as well. There are different learning paths available for different roles involved in supporting people with employment. We have a basic training for all roles, which we recommend everyone who has a part in supporting employment for people on waivers take. After you've taken that basic training, we have some role-specific trainings as well. There's a learning path for waiver case managers, for VRS and SSB staff, for waiver employment service providers, and for VRS and SSB job placement providers. Now let's talk about what's covered in the E1MN training. It covers employment service expectations and outcomes. It also introduces you to helpful tools and resources you can use to make your job easier, like My Vault, for example. It reviews the responsibilities of all employment team members, as well as doing a deeper dive into how you can carry out the specific responsibilities of your role, especially around collaboration and coordination with the team to help ensure a seamless process for the people you support as they move between different phases of their employment journey. Whether you're someone who is only vaguely familiar with the term E1MN and you want to just get started wrapping your head around what it means, or if you're someone who has been involved in E1MN and employment services for quite a while and are looking to deepen your understanding of strategies for effective collaboration, the training has information and resources that can support you in your role. You can find the E1MN training on the Disability Hub website, disabilityhubmn.org. It's in the For Professionals section in the Work Toolkit, specifically within the section titled Supporting People on Waivers. We did also stick a direct link to the training on the slide here. Like I said, we really encourage starting out with that basic training for all roles and then moving on to take your role-specific training. Each one of those learning paths contains between 5 and 8 pages of content featuring videos, resources, practice activities, and quiz questions to check your knowledge. We hope you all check it out and that it can be a resource to you all in your work. There were a lot of legislative changes last year that came out of the report submitted by the Task Force on Eliminating Subminimum Wages. During the final part of our presentation, we wanted to share an update on some of the work that has come out of that legislative session. One of the changes to legislation last year was a new requirement that all disability waiver case managers which is to say case managers who work with people on CADI, CAC, DT, or BI waivers must complete an employment support training course. For all the current case managers, they must complete it by August 1st of this year. And then for all case managers hired after that, they'll have to complete it within their first 6 months of providing case management services. Up until now, there has not been a requirement for case managers to get trained in employment. So now case managers will be able to have this training to help build their knowledge and skills in supporting people to explore and pursue employment. The training that is now required for case managers includes 6 modules that cover a pretty wide range of topics related to employment. Some of those topics include the Employment First movement and Minnesota's Employment First policy, how to ensure people are able to make informed choices about employment, and strategies for having conversations about work with those they support and address common concerns or myths about employment. The content from the E1MN training, which I mentioned earlier, is also included in this, which covers content like the engage, plan, find, keep framework and the services available at each stage to support people with employment, as well as roles and responsibilities of different members of a person's team. The training then dives into the specific role and responsibilities of the waiver case manager and the information the case manager needs to know to fulfill the responsibilities of their role, such as connecting a person to services, coordinating services and transitions between phases, and collaborating with the rest of the team. The training opened up at the end of February, and as I mentioned, current case managers are required to have it completed by August 1st, and we're on a good pace for meeting that so far. As of May 6th, of the a little over 3,000 case managers in the state, 1,296 had enrolled in the training, and 850 of those have completed it. We're seeing that number get higher every day and are monitoring completion. We know that case managers have an important role on a person's team, and this training will support them in that role to help ensure the seamless experience for people as they access employment services. With that, I'll pass it to Christy for another update.
Thanks, Cole. This is Christy Howe with DHS, and I'm going to talk pretty briefly about the interagency alignment study. That came out of the sub-minimum wage task force recommendations as well, and legislation, so that's really exciting. And the language here is from legislation, kind of giving us directions on what we need to do. We need to do a study to look at employment supports, look at service rates, look at provider enrollment and monitoring standards, eligibility processes, and people's experience going through the services. So, this is I think a great opportunity. It gives us the specific task and funding to do this work. We all know there's things to be adjusted to have it be a seamless and efficient system. So we are in the very early stages of this. We're just in the planning stage now, where we're looking to contract with a consulting service to provide support to us. So we're hoping that we will have that wrapped up in the next month or so, and then be able to move to the next stage, which is really developing the research questions and the processes that we want to track. And we have good ideas at this point of what that is. Like following people through services, like what type of paperwork is redundant for intakes and into VR, into the waiver. We want to make sure that we're following a variety of scenarios through the process. We want to go through the engage, plan, find, keep process, the 511 from when people say they want to work to actually getting into services. And then moving from youth services to adult services. And then of course, looking at the rates, what's incentivizing CIE, what might not be. So that'll be really interesting too. And the provider enrollment is also something we're looking forward to digging into. So we are kind of gathering the subject matter experts that'll be part of this group in connection with our consultants, and then we'll be pulling in other experts as we get to each different task. We're going to be bringing in an advisory panel of people with lived experiences, providers, advocacy organizations, a variety of people that can give good insight and suggestions and help guide some of this work. And we've got from now until the end of 2027 to work on this project. And so we're going to be taking an approach where we are researching, seeing what's going out there, making some changes, and then following those changes through as well, so that we are making sure that they're effective, but also that we're not waiting until 2027 to make any changes. Like we have some good ideas on what we'll need to change and want to do that sooner rather than later. So that is kind of where we're at. Again, just the early stages, but we should see more movement over the summer, and then hopefully start doing the kind of implementing the study this fall. So I know we've got some Q&A time for this, but if you go to the next slide, Cole, here's also the way that you can send us questions specifically if they come up afterwards through the request form.
All right, thank you so much to our state agency partners for that overview. If anyone has any questions, please drop them in the Q&A or raise your hand and I can unmute you so that you can ask it. A question that I have, Christy, about that interagency alignment study is for if there's anyone on this call who might want to follow that or maybe even get involved with some of the opportunities, what could they do to watch out for those opportunities?
That is a really good question, and I was anticipating it, and I do not have an answer. So what I will do, so we had the advisory panel when the service sequencing started, and I, of course, wasn't with DHS at this point. So we would be looking to kind of revamp that and like start using it again. So Beth, could you respond to that question?
Yeah, so I think what we will do, so we are just starting this process. The legislation came out and we have to do, we get to do, I'm excited, I'm super excited about doing this interagency alignment study. So we're still figuring out the details, but we have the Disability Hub, mn.org website where we post pretty much everything we do. And in our last round, when we first started E1MN and we were working on the MOU, between Voc Rehab and DHS, we had a section on the page that was specific to E1MN and keeping people updated on what was happening. So I suspect we will post things there. And so we'll be sure to include people as we go. Also, we give updates in our Implement First e-list. So if you're not signed up for that, that is an important spot to get information as well. And I don't know, Cole, did you have, it looked like you were going to type something.
Any updates will be sent out through our E1MN newsletter. So if you're not already subscribed, you can sign up for that and get the information that way too.
And these slides will be shared after the presentation so that people can access the links in them.
I wanted to ask a question. I saw your question, Don, in the Q&A. And I just wanted to touch base on that if anyone is still interested in why service providers weren't brought into these regional meetings. I'll just talk and hope that you guys are interested. So for the people who know me, I came from the provider world. I've been at DHS for just a few months now. So I was a provider when all of these changes came out. You know, we started working with VR for the PBA, and so I was part of the meetings at that point, and also part of these ones. And from my perspective, when the service sequencing came out, it was so new. It was new for everyone, and like it was happening. It was happening as we were all learning. So because people were already in the service and they needed to make those changes, providers were brought in because there wasn't the time to like make sure everyone was solid on the process before it started happening. So we were learning and doing in real time. And so the youth with the work is a little bit different. Oh, I do want to mention that coming from the provider world, and then part of my job is I'm always talking about how things affect providers. So I try to represent that view as much as I can and make sure that things are being addressed as they need to. So with the youth one, it's really doing that kind of coordination between, or that learning, that education between the different agencies at the level of the school, the counselor, and the case manager, to understand how they need to work together, what they need, what are their processes. Like, for example, I think about waivered services, and I think about how do we make sure that students transition into adult services seamlessly, and how do we make sure they have waivers? That's something for the case manager to do. You know, that's their job. And I can't speak to the process of how does one get a waiver. When do we need to start the process of setting up a waiver in order to have it by graduation? So, you know, that's kind of one example of what we look at. And that's really a conversation between the schools, the counselors, and case managers. And then providers come in when that conversation becomes about a specific person. You know, when they're authorizing a service that, like a VR pre-ed services that is contracted through a provider, or when they're getting ready to move to waivered services, that's where the providers are coming in. So it's at that individual level versus that kind of education between case managers and VR. Like I know before, providers had a large role in helping to educate case managers about VR and VR coordinators about case managers. And so it's really putting that job on the plates of VR and case managers. If that is helpful, would you add anything, Beth? I see you on my screen, so I'll ask you if you.
I also
add
saw that
anything.
Don had his hand up, so you might have like a clarifying question. So Don, I'm gonna unmute you so that you can jump in and say what you have to say. Go for it.
Thank you. First of all, Christy, I understand everything that you said.
Mhm.
I have worked in this transition employment space, you know, for many years. And I guess the point that I would make is that I think problem solving regionally is going to depend on having all of the stakeholders together and working together to solve problems. It could be, you know, what type of transportation might be available to someone if competitive integrated employment is going to be an option that's going to be, you know, an option that's going to be weighed and evaluated by a family member as well as the student. It could be that a person has a complex, they live with a complex disability and they're going to need a customized type of employment approach. And maybe that service provider has some of those staff resources to implement a change like that. We know that some people may not work full time. And if you have a family member saying, well, they only have the capacity to work 15 hours a week. Therefore, competitive employment doesn't look like a good option. Well, we are now in the provider world looking at community life engagement, or what in Minnesota is being called meaningful day service. So all I'm trying to say is that I believe that service providers need to be part of the answer, and everybody needs to be on the same page, working together to make sure that the resources are available to implement the transformational change that I think all of us want.
Agree. With all of that, and the way I think of that is that a lot of that is coming in at the individual level, like you're saying, of what transportation options would be available for them, kind of going through that customized employment process. So that's absolutely the space that we would want, and everyone would want providers to come in. Because we know that providers have that information, they have those resources, and how to share that with families and teams. But it really is at that individual level, and then where those conversations would be happening.
Yeah, and this is Beth. I just wanted to note that I totally agree with you, Don and Christy, everything that has been said. And yeah, definitely was not the intent to not bring providers in to the planning for people. What we heard, I keep going back to what we heard. We kept hearing that folk rehab, waiver case managers, and schools don't know how to work together very well. We heard that over and over again, especially when we were doing the MOU between voc rehab and waivers, DHS, how they work together as professionals. And so I think when we set out to do this round of regional meetings, we really want to strengthen that. How do we help? How do we provide space for schools, waiver case managers, and voc rehab and SSB staff to work together well and learn how to collaborate? And a lot of them already do, but some don't. So how do we offer that space? And at the right time, to bring in the providers in. And so the other thing we heard is a lot of times it's up to the provider to kind of drive the bus. And that is not what we want. We don't want one entity making decisions or saying this is what this person needs. We want everybody working together. So how can we help support that collaboration between the ones that are doing the plans for the person? So the waiver case manager is doing a support plan, the IEP is done at the school, and the employment plan is done at VR. So how do we help that happen and bring in the providers at the right time? So I think Danielle, we are way over time, I think. So sorry about that. I just wanted to get that out there. Thanks for your question, Don.
No problem. Great conversation. And I just answered a question that slides will be sent to everyone who registered for this training following the training, probably tomorrow. So watch for that email. And I am going to finish this out with just a quick update on what MTI has been doing for the past couple of years and what we're thinking about for the next couple of years for the Minnesota Transformation Initiative. Because again, this is another statewide employment initiative, a lot going on in Minnesota right now. So MTI began about 2 years ago. We're finishing up our second year, and I'm just going to highlight, this is not an exhaustive list of everything we've done, but I'm just going to provide some of the overarching highlights for those of you who have maybe heard of MTI, maybe been to a couple of webinars, but don't exactly know what we do. Hopefully this will help a little bit. So I'm going to first start off with the provider reinvention grants. There were 2 provider reinvention grant programs over the last couple of years that MTI helped to support. One was the Transition to Competitive Wages grant. There were 8 grantees, all of which had committed to ending some minimum wage within their organizations. So we provided intensive technical assistance to those 8 grantees. Those grants ended March 31st. The employment provider transition grants also ended at the end of March. There were 14 of those grantees, and MTI provided targeted technical assistance to 5 of those. We also offered organizational mentoring. There are 5 providers across the state that received mentoring from other providers around their organizational transformation. We offered a variety of statewide training opportunities, including these quarterly webinar trainings. This is our 12th one that we've hosted over the last 2 years. We also last spring partnered with MORE, the Minnesota Organization for Habilitation and Rehabilitation, to host a track of sessions on transformation at their spring conference. And we will be back just next week at the MORE Spring Conference up in St. Cloud to do another track of sessions focused on expanding capacity for competitive integrated employment and community life outcomes. We also partnered with the Minnesota Association of People Supporting Employment First to develop and host 2 regional in-person trainings for direct support staff and employment providers. We developed and offered a leadership course for mid-level managers. That's such a key role in for those providers that are shifting away from minimum wage, shifting away from center-based employment toward competitive integrated employment. That leadership training is for the mid-level managers is essential. We had about 15 mid-level managers participate in this first cohort this past year. And we also began to offer more training opportunities, including a community of practice and some technical assistance around community life engagement. And that's a phrase that's really new to a lot of people in Minnesota. But the way I like to say it is that community life engagement is to day supports as competitive integrated employment is to employment services. So it's an outcome that we're hoping to achieve. We're hoping through the use of services such as day supports to connect people to their communities, to build skills, to grow relationships with people. And that's what we mean by community life engagement. And again, it's kind of a newer concept and definitely a newer phrase, but there's been a lot of interest across Minnesota in digging into and understanding how we can use day supports to get people better connected within their communities and doing things that they like within their communities. So we began some trainings and offerings around that, and we will definitely be continuing to do that in the future. Engagement with lead agencies. We started just a tiny bit of work over the past year working with lead agencies, including providing some targeted training and or technical assistance to 5 counties. And we hosted a 4-part training series for case managers and case management supervisors from 2 regions. A lot that was learned from that dabbling working with counties, and that will lay the foundation for some work we'll be doing over the next few years as well. And then the final thing that we did over the past couple of years that I want to highlight is peer mentoring. With our partners at the ARC Minnesota, MTI has established a peer mentorship program. We have peer mentors across the state who are trained to mentor people who are transitioning out of some minimum wage or people with disabilities who want to explore competitive integrated employment who might be new to that. It's a really great program, a lot of opportunity here to get people connected to someone who's gone through something similar. And talk about it with that person. The peer mentorship program also hosts monthly virtual mentor sessions that are open to the public for people to join. So again, that was not an exhaustive list, but just some highlights from the past couple of years. And I want to give a little bit of a preview into what we're planning over the next 2 years. Those provider reinvention grant programs that we spent a lot of time on over the past couple of years have ended. And so it's just opened up some opportunities for us to consider what else can MTI be doing and how should we be focusing our energy. So we have 6 primary buckets of work, I'll say, and I'll talk a little bit about what we're thinking. And the work plan is still being finalized, so I can't give extensive details, but at least want to highlight what generally we'll be doing over the next couple of years. So even though the grant program for providers ended in March and there is not currently additional funding to support provider transformation, at least explicitly, there are still innovation grants and some other opportunities. MTI will still be offering provider technical assistance. We'll be planning sometime in the next few months to be opening up an application for providers that are interested in receiving technical assistance from our team, either to transition away from minimum wage, transition away from center-based work, or simply to grow their capacity to support competitive integrated employment and community life engagement. Any provider is interested in receiving support from our team in any of those areas will be able to apply for our cohort model of technical assistance, which means that they'll receive intensive technical assistance from our team and also have opportunities through the community of practice to connect with other organizations, other providers across the state who are working with us to share their experiences, learn from each other. So there'll be an application coming out for that. We'll also offer more targeted technical assistance. So if providers reach out with a specific ask, like I need help with putting together a training plan. We're starting employment services. I don't know how to train my staff. Could you help us put together a training plan? That's something that we will hopefully be able to offer. So we'll have a menu of kind of targeted technical assistance asks that'll be out there, hopefully make reaching out to us and asking for support a little more accessible and more straightforward. We'll also continue to offer statewide training, including these quarterly webinar trainings. We're going to be looking at and refining the mid-level manager training, and also just trying to keep open to what are the training needs out there. And we're going to be doing some needs assessment to explore various levels within provider organizations, possibly within counties, what training is needed, how can we help fill some of those gaps. So we within MTI are trying really hard to be a flexible and responsive technical assistance center, and are always looking for suggestions from people about what training they think is needed within their organization or within their region. And so we'll be trying to develop and respond to those as they come up over the next few years. We'll be doing a lot more work with lead agencies, with counties and with tribal nations in the coming few years. The lead agency capacity building grants that will be funded through legislative funding. The RFP for that should be coming out, or sorry, a request for proposals for that should be coming out sometime soon-ish. And MTI will be providing technical assistance to those lead agencies that received the grant to help them put together a plan for improving employment outcomes within their county. And then helping them implement that over the course of their grants. We're also going to be a lot more intentional about the development and dissemination of resources. When MTI was started, the intent was that it'd be a 2-year project, but now that we have extended funding for MTI, we want to be very thoughtful about how we are developing resources and tools and making that available. We do have a website right now. It's not the most easily navigated website. There's also so many resources out there, and I think sometimes people struggle to figure out exactly where they are. And so we're going to try to figure out some ways to make resources that are very specific to this work more easy to find and more useful. MTI will be providing some planning and guidance around policy and outcome data collection to DHS. So a unique role that MTI has is that we work very closely on the ground with providers and soon with lead agencies across the state. We work with very, very small providers. We work with very large providers. We work with metro-based providers. We work with very rural providers. So it gives us a unique position to kind of like step back and see how are policies affecting things on the ground, and in all different areas, all different parts of the state, all sizes of providers. And so we're going to take some of that knowledge we're gaining through this experience and bring that back to provide some recommendations to DHS on what policies could be adjusted so that we can better facilitate the improvement of employment outcomes for people with disabilities. And then the final bucket of work that we're planning for the next couple of years is continuing the Life Course Connect pilot. Life Course Connect is a suite of online tools that people can use to help set goals for themselves as a person with a disability or for their loved one with a disability, and to help plan to meet those goals. It uses Charting the Life Course tools to do that. And so we'll be piloting that over the next year, and then also continuing to expand opportunities for peer mentorship as well. Okay, so that's a very broad overview of generally what we're planning for the next few years. But as opportunities from MTI arise, such as applying to participate in our cohort model provider technical assistance or hearing about the lead agency capacity building grants, please subscribe to the MTI newsletter. That comes out monthly now, and we share some things that are going on around the state regarding transformation and employment for people with disabilities. And we also share training opportunities that are relevant to this work, and some resources as well. So we try to keep it pretty short and pointed. So hopefully it's not too cumbersome to read, but it's a great way just to know what's going on. All right, and then as we wrap up here today, I will also am going to share some upcoming training opportunities. If anyone has questions about MTI or stuff we're doing, please drop that in the Q&A now. But the upcoming MTI training opportunities next week, our entire TA team will be at the Moore Spring Training Conference in Waite Park. The registration for that conference is closed, but if you are already registered and will be there, come say hi and maybe come check out 1 or 2 or 4 of our sessions. We'd love to see you there. And then our next MTI quarterly training will be August 15th, 1 to 2:30 p.m. Topic to be determined and announced. Look in our newsletter or on our website for that, for more information and registration for any of those. Okay, I'm going to, I don't see any other questions. If I'll just like pause for a moment in case someone wants to raise their hand or anything else to wrap this up. But while we wait for that, we do have a really quick evaluation for this training. I'll also drop the link for that in the chat. It looks like we'll be ending a few minutes early, so you have a little bit of time, hopefully, to complete it before you go on to your next thing. So there's the link in the chat. We really love getting ideas for trainings. There's an opportunity for that in the eval. Please let us know what would be helpful to you, because we take that very seriously and use that to plan our upcoming trainings. All right. Thank you so much to our state agency partners who joined us today to share all of the work that they're doing to bring more employment to people with disabilities across Minnesota. It was great to have all of you and appreciate all of the partnerships that we're seeing across the state. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining today. Watch your emails for the slides and for the eval if you're not able to fill it out now. And thanks very much, everyone. Have a great rest of your day.